Grace and peace, and spoiler alert for the movie Extraction. My name's Ryan, and I'm the movie pastor. What I do is I watch movies and then I interpret them and I engage with them. I treat them as a text and try to figure out what they are saying and what they're saying has to say about deeper things, about theology, about morality, whether I agree or disagree on the basis of Christian theology and worldview and messaging and all those things. I'm also really interested in interpreting movies in ways that make them enjoyable. I'm a movie fan. So rather than be a movie critic, I want to find the reading of the movie that makes it most interesting and most enjoyable for us. Sometimes I lament the fact that I feel like on this channel I often wear the robe of the expert. I'm often the person who understands the movie, and I'm going to tell you what the correct understanding of the movie is. And like there are some ways in which that's true. I feel like I'm good at what I do. I find a lot of meaning in movies, but I don't know everything, and what I interpret from a movie isn't necessarily the only right thing to interpret from a movie. And also, sometimes I'm lost, and that's true with all texts. There are some parts of the Bible that I do not understand. Like, I don't know what it means, and I'm not sure, like, there are possible interpretations, but it could go this way. Like, Genesis 6:4, there were giants in the land in those days, and the sons of God had children with the daughters of... Like, it's just weird. And the response, then, is to wrestle and to get down in the mud and to play. And sometimes the most enjoyable parts of the biblical text for me are the parts that I don't understand, and so there's still work to do. There's something new to figure out. There's more to the puzzle. And that's kind of how I feel about Extraction. It's a movie made by a stuntman, by Sam Hargrave. And so it has some incredible action sequences. One in particular, really long one-shot action sequence that's just technically amazing. And a lot of pretty great popcorn action in a pretty thin plot. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to work out what it's saying, because what it seems to be saying is I found a way to take this character through lots of stunts, which is a valid thing to say. Like I think even if what the movie Extraction is telling us is let stuntmen direct movies more, I would be in favor of that. That's a good message, and we should, because man, that's cool.
I think having a background as a stunt coordinator greatly informs my decisions as a director, because I've been through most of the things that I'm then directing in front of the camera. Whatever I've asked Chris or any other stunt performer to do, I've either done myself or have designed, to some degree. I think coming from an action background, it's a language that I speak fluently, and if I didn't have that experience, it might be a little harder to arrive at the action to the level that I wanted.
And that's fun, and we need more of that in Hollywood compared to the cutty action sequences that just don't hit hard and they bring you out of the story.
It's how I grew up watching action in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s of Hong Kong cinema, and I feel like it's I don't know, for me action is a way to tell a story in a dynamic way, and if you're not able to see what's happening, if you're not able to experience it as the characters do, then you're missing a lot of the impact of the moment.
With that said, there's a repeated line in the movie, so we should bring that up. The repeated line in the movie comes from Paulo Coelho, and it is, "You drown not by falling in a river, but by remaining submerged in it." And they bring that back to us both in dialogue and also visually. When we're first introduced to Rake, he just jumping off a cliff into a river and staying submerged there. And then we return to that again at Rake's death, where he falls in a river and stays submerged there. And then finally, at the end of the film, Ovi jumps off a diving board, gets in the water, and gets back out. So he's the guy who is not obsessed. Like Rake throughout his life has had kind of a death wish. He's just not interested in preserving himself, but Ovi is. And so he's able to take the gifts that Rake has to offer, but outlive him. And that's, I don't know, it's something. It's not very much, but I think it's maybe more if you combine it with the idea. Extraction is based upon a graphic novel. It's a graphic novel written by the Russo brothers. And in the graphic novel, Rake is taking a girl through the Ciudad de Este in, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but Paraguay. So it's a totally different city. They moved it and they put it in Bangladesh. And presumably because for Sam Hargrave, it doesn't matter, right? Like whatever city, he's just in a city. And it doesn't seem like Ciudad, the graphic novel, had this quote or this visual motif of falling in rivers and staying there. So it seems like the kind of quote that a stuntman might think is really deep. Like in a lot of ways, it's not a deep quote, right? Like it's kind of a basic observation about life that's a little bit of a deepity. Like it seems deeper than it is, because in a lot of ways, like on one level, it's trivially true. Like, yeah, obviously, you know, the way you drown is by not breathing anymore. And in another way, it's like not true. Like, hey, the only way to be overcome by something is by like just not shaking it off. Like, no, there are some things that you really can't shake off, and that's the problem. But if I were a stuntman, I think it would be important to me to know that, like, if this stunt goes wrong and I hurt myself, what will be dangerous for me is not that an accident took place, but whether or not I am willing to overcome the accident.
We were drifting around corners trying to stay very close to the car I was chasing that Hemsworth was in, and it was very dusty. We were going under a tunnel and the lead car was in front of us. It skidded around the corner, kicked up some dust so we couldn't see. He had spun out and come to a stop. We didn't have time to brake and we T-boned his car. Very fortunately, my feet went up into the wheel well, a few feet one way or the other, and my feet might have been crushed. Things like that, putting myself right there in the action.
And so if I use that as like motivation for myself day to day, I might be able to build that up. And so I'm like psychoanalyzing into the mind of the author here. But it seems like that's something that Sam threw in. And what I have to ask then is not necessarily what Paulo meant or what Ovi meant or what Rake represents when they say that line, but rather what it means to Sam. And what it seems to mean there is don't give up. And keep pushing and endure physical suffering for the sake of quality. And Sam certainly has done that. I mean, he worked on Winter Soldier and all those sorts of things. And I love that is represented in the story and on the screen. I love that idea shows up in Rake and how Rake acts. Rake in a lot of ways acts like a stuntman. And it also shows up in the dedication to craft represented by the way Extraction is made, despite the fact that it's a kind of stupid, plotless action movie. It's a stupid, plotless action movie made with incredible dedication to quality.
That I felt necessary to capture the sequence in the way I wanted to see it and that I think fans deserve.
Am I floundering? Like, do you see more depth here than I do? Because that's what I see in the text, and I still am not sure exactly what to do with it. But that's true, and boy, it sure has been fun to like ask that question. Like, if they make a sequel, I want to watch it and I want to ask that question again, and sometimes that's all a text needs to do in order to be meaningful, right? Like, I think there are two kinds of text. Some texts are arguments, right? So, some pieces of writing are made to convince you of something. You know, here's why you should wear a mask, or here's why you shouldn't wear a mask, right? They're trying to get you to get an idea from the page into your head. Some texts, like poems, are poems. And the purpose of a poem is to read the poem. And by reading the poem, you get better at reading the poem. And you have a better sense of the intonation and the rhythm and the meter and read it better next time. Some texts are just there for themselves, and some are kind of both. Some have elements of both going on. What do you see in Extraction?